To hear a man and see a man like Carl Bean, who just was just such an optimist about life and had such a strong spiritual attitude. I mean, that just makes you feel good. When you walk out of the theater, it was like you just felt uplifted. And to come away from the documentary feeling like that is a wonderful thing in this climate today.
Welcome to Bitch Talk. I'm your host, Erin.
And I'm co-host Ange, aka Captain Party.
And for more than 11 years, the show has celebrated underrepresented voices in pop culture and beyond.
But not in the snore kind of way, which is why our listeners and followers have graciously voted us Best of the Bay, Best Podcast on 48 Hills for 3 years in a row. Three-peat, bitches.
If you like what you hear, follow us on Instagram and check out our website, Bitch Talk Podcast, and rate us wherever you listen to podcasts.
We're begging you to judge us. When does that ever happen? Oh, you're not going to say anything?
Oh, what'd I say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, on that note, on with the show. Clink. All right, Bitch Talkers, we are here at Frameline 2025 to talk about a documentary called We Are Pat, about one of Erin and I's favorite SNL sketches from our childhoods. And we're going to process this with our director here, Rowan Haber. Welcome to Bitch Talk.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, so our audience has not seen the film yet. So can you describe what We Are Pat is about?
Yes, totally. So We're Pat is a look at the evolution of gender and comedy through the lens of the iconic It's Pat sketch from SNL, which was in the 90s. And it's sort of at the core of the movie is this sort of question of like, can we reclaim things that hurt us? Like, what are the limits of humor? And also just kind of how do we evaluate art that has aged poorly to a certain extent. So the film, in trying to answer those questions, I get together this writer's room full of trans comics to look at the original Pat sketches and try to reimagine a modern Pat for today and see if we actually can, in fact, reclaim Pat.
Yeah, we talk a lot over the last, 10 years on Bitch Talk about, problematic faves. A friend of ours had a show called that. And we have a lot of problematic faves. I mean, it's a story as old as time. But this is really a reckoning about that. And you're processing this through this film. Can you talk about, are there any surprises that came up for you while you were talking about the sketch? And also, I don't think it's too much to say you did talk with Julia. But like, can you talk about your processing of this and then maybe rewatching everything with other people?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was, the whole film is basically me processing Pat. I
You were
joked
all
that
processing.
exactly. I joked that actually the film was just like was really expensive therapy for me and Julia. So I think a couple things that were surprising to me were like, one was that the variety of reactions to Pat, and that sort of spans every reaction imaginable. So there's on one end, there's folks like Abby McEnany who did Work in Progress, who had a very like, personal and negative kind of experience with being called Pat, and that was like a really real thing. There are folks in the movie who were called Pat, and who also felt like Pat to a certain extent was a cautionary tale to them of like what you should not be, like sort of that if you are like Pat, then you will be illegible, you'll never be loved, no one will want to be with you, everyone will always be like wondering what you are. And then on the other hand, I was surprised to find that a lot of people really were like, well, I knew Pat wasn't great, but Pat was sort of like this dog whistle that let me know that transness existed and that non-binariness was a thing and that people like Pat could exist. All the way to people like JD Sampson, who sort of found like calls Pat in the film a sort of trans mask hero of mine. So it was surprising to hear, how many people had Pat like experiences. And that was like really ranged across like, across sort of age, and even race and gender expression. You know, like Brontez Purnell, who's someone who I love so much, you know, who's Bay Area local, like said that he got called Pat when he was young, you know, and it's very, that was surprising. The biggest revelation of the film is for me really was just that Pat, to a certain extent, came out of Julia's own sort of feelings of being kind of in a gendered position that she didn't particularly like, in terms of having these expectations of femininity placed on her by her mom and the way that she was raised. And then also really just being in a 90s writer's room in that kind of like boys club of comedy, which has always existed, but particularly during the 90s, it was like very bro centric. And on SNL, when like we have all these huge names like Chris Rock um, and Adam Sandler and Mike Myers, like all these big boisterous personalities. And, you know, she just kind of felt under this gendered pressure and to behave in a specific way. And that Pat kind of was like an outlet for her. So I think that was something that I learned that I felt like was kind of touching and really relatable. Yeah.
That is my favorite scene in the film when Julia Sweeney, the actress who created It's Pat, sits down with your writer's room filled with queer, trans folks, all of the above,
Yeah.
and everybody processing it together. And her surprise, and you know, she didn't have it all goes back to intent, right? She never intended to hurt anybody, and with comedy there's that line. So I feel like watching that scene was like, this is what progress looks like. We can't just cut people off. We need to have conversations and understand where each other's coming from.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you said that, because that is what I hope people take away from the film, which is basically like people can make mistakes. And if you have a conversation with them and they are willing to go through a sort of like, for lack of a better term, accountability process, although I wouldn't really exactly call it that in this case. Um, but you know, that people can grow, you know, and that actually like healing can be had on both sides, which I think is really true. Like I think a lot of folks involved in the film felt healed by being able to talk to Julia. And Julia herself was like, this was incredibly meaningful for her, because I think, you know, after the film came out, after It's Pat, the movie came out and flopped, and, you know, Pat was then later called transphobic. Like, you know, she was like, oh God, I'm famous for one thing, and the one thing that I'm famous for is now considered to be really fucked up. Like, that's not a fun legacy to have. So, I really, yeah, I do think that it was meaningful and hopefully is like a bit of a model for how people can actually like have these hard conversations across differences.
It's so hard not to spoil this movie. I'm gonna really try not to, but the part where you do visit Julia's house
Yes.
and the things that she has collected through her life, you're
Yeah.
like, that's also a little bit of therapy, right? Because you're like, what what do you it's just like you're watching, you're like, you were collecting all these
Yeah,
things,
you're like
and
making
then
connections.
you created this like iconic or not iconic character. But can you talk about that revelation to you and kind of stepping into that space and being like, let's talk.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, so yeah, I mean, I don't think it totally spoils the film to say, but Julia has this sort of like whole like Adam and Eve art collection, and this whole like kind of obsession with gender that is truly apparent in her home through these various objects that she has. Like I was looking at her bookshelf, because that's whenever Julia and I would hang out and film, we would just talk about books. And like she has like all this like Judith Butler and, you know, different, you know, Jack Halberstam, and I was just like, okay, Julia, like you're really looking into this. And I think that yeah, she just has a fascination with gender, which, you know, I asked her kind of how that came about, and I sort of think that what happened was maybe she had a bit of that fascination obviously before she created Pat, but then I think after she created Pat, she continued going on this journey of like, well, why do we have these gender binaries? And what do they mean? And I think she would say, she's kind of annoyed by the fact that there are these binaries. Like, why does everything have to be so like women do X and men do Y? Why can't people just like do what they want, essentially? Which is like, honestly, Julia, yes, this is what the queer community has been saying forever. So, yeah.
This is a side note, but the house that you're having this meeting in, it's gorgeous. There's a beautiful swimming pool on the outside.
Yeah.
Where is this house located? Can we be invited to the next meeting? I
I
was
mean,
just like, what
honestly,
is this location?
yes, that is one of our like executive producers loaned us his home. So it's sadly not my house, and it's no one else's house. So it is his house, and it is great. It's a beautiful home.
Okay, but now my real question. So I just, as a side note, I was like, oh my God, what is this location? So how many of the cast and crew members got Pat tattoos? Because I'm thinking of Aaron, you want to get matching Pat tattoos now?
Sure. Yep.
Yes.
I'm kind of into it too.
They're really, both of them, the two that you show are really cute. So are any of them on your body?
Yes. So the small Pat tattoo is indeed on
This
my
one. Yeah.
on my arm. It's right there. See, little
I
Pat.
love it. I love it.
And then Grace, honestly, there's only two so far, but the other one is on Grace Freud's body. And Grace is someone who is like, I will do whatever the fuck I want in this life, and I'm not afraid. So she she got a Pat tramp stamp, which is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, which is in the credits, where she gets a full-on Pat tramp stamp. And I have a picture of Julia like next to the Pat tramp stamp, like smiling, which is really cute.
Oh, that is really good. That should go somewhere on the website or something.
Yeah, but I'm all for people getting Pat tattoos. Let's do it.
I love it.
I mean, before we have to wrap, I do love your writer's room. Everyone in there is great. And the thing that I really learned is that Pat is fuckable. So
cushion for the pushing.
Yeah, I'm just like, it's in there. That might be the tattoo. But
I love that. I love that.
That is fuckable.
Or just like Pat's face and then fuckable above.
Yeah.
I love that. Please, that would be amazing.
I mean, what did you have to cut out of those conversations? And did it just kill you to be like, oh, we can't use that?
Honestly, we didn't. I feel like we didn't lose that. We didn't cut that many darlings out of the writer's room in particular, because so much of it was so good. It was just kind of like, but yeah, definitely there were some jokes that were like really funny that didn't make it in, but we had to include Pat as fuckable. I mean, that was, or Brontez's question, like, what if Pat were really hung? I was like, this is going in, this is definitely going in. And honestly, since like filming that, I've learned that lots of people think Pat is fuckable, apparently, and I'm not trying to spread rumors here, but apparently Kate Berlant like had a thing for Pat when she was growing up. So there we go.
You do really have a who's who of like comedians in the field. Like Murray Hill, we love so much.
Yes.
River Gaio, we've had on our show.
Oh, I love it.
Is so much talent just on screen from who you got to interview about Pat. It's really impressive. Yeah. Sabrina Wu, I think, right? Yeah. It's just like everyone who you would want to see talking about this, you got like that. Yeah. Your producers or whoever, like you really were wrangling.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. No, I mean, there's so much talent and so much trans talent specifically that, I mean, so many comics that we didn't get to feature that are amazing. So it's like, yeah, it's such a fun group and such a like wild. I mean, honestly, we just came from Tribeca, and we did like a roast of Julia Sweeney after the premiere, and it was crazy. It was so much fun. Like, it was just like Future, who's in the film, Janaea Future Khan, was like, one of their lines was like, at one point they turned to Julia's husband and was like, you better not slip up, because if you do, I'm right there coming for Julia. Like, it was very, very fun. So yeah, it's a great group.
It's just such a nice time to laugh about these things together and for something to be connected, connecting us all. I really thought I was going to watch this film and feel guilty, like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I laughed at that so much," or that, which, there's a reckoning of sorts, but then there was also so much joy. So I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, that was a relief." It was very comforting.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad. No, yeah. And that's so not our intention. Like my intention is to, make people think and make people laugh, but also not to feel bad about laughing at Pat if you're, sort of depending on what you're laughing at, right? Like I think Pat is funny. I think, it is okay to laugh at Pat, more so if you're laughing at, the people around Pat who are kind of, but also sometimes you can laugh at Pat because Pat's like sort of demeanor is really funny. Pat's
Yes.
the
Mhm.
physicality that Julia has, the sort of like commitment to the bit, Pat's obliviousness. Those are all really funny things.
Mhm.
I mean, Pat's a rebel,
Yeah.
and
Oh
like
yeah.
and Julia was just like kind of like fuck you to the establishment with
Yeah.
Pat. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
Totally.
Pat is also really freaky. I didn't realize, like, who put on the condom, Pat? Both of us.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
Pat's freaky. I
So
really didn't remember all
truly.
that.
I mean, honestly, if you go back and rewatch It's Pat the movie, there's like a very cute, like I call It's Pat the movie a T for T rom-com because there's
oh.
another character called Chris who's also no one can read what gender they are, but like I'm reading Chris is like trans femme and Pat is trans masc. And it's like such a cute, weird, funny, freaky comedy that I think that should be revived as like a midnight movie.
Hmm.
Maybe
Okay.
Frameline next year will do that. You should talk to them when you
Amazing.
We
Please.
should
I
play
hope
it
so.
like at Dolores Park or something. That sounds really
Exactly.
fun.
And we just throw
Okay.
like nuts and bananas at the screen.
Oh, Rowan, this was so fun. Thank you for revisiting It's Pat and showing us that we could still love things from our past.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
What's up, bitch talkers? We are here at Frameline 2025, celebrating a very beautiful documentary that we just watched called I Was Born This Way. And we're sitting down here with the director and producer. I'm going to have them introduce themselves so you can recognize their voices. We'll start here with our director.
I'm Sam Pollard, the co-director of I Was Born This Way with Daniel Youngie.
I'm Wellington Love, and I'm the producer of I Was Born This Way.
Okay, great. So, Sam, can you introduce our audience to this documentary?
This documentary is about a gentleman named Carl Bean, the late Carl Bean, who was a singer, a minister, an archbishop. In the mid-70s, he did a song called I Was Born This Way for the Motown label that became a big hit during the disco era. And then he went on to become a minister when the HIV crisis came about and got very actively involved in that and opened up his own church out in Los Angeles, which then spread to other churches. They started other churches around the country, specifically in Brooklyn, New York. And then he became an archbishop, and he was a very, very positive human being who had a very optimistic look on life. And Daniel Youngie met him about 6 years ago and interviewed him, did a long interview with him, which he sent to me an assembly of. And I felt this was an important film I wanted to be involved with. And then I think around that was 5 years ago, and I think I'll let Wellington pick it up from there.
Yeah, I mean, I Was Born This Way is really a celebration of Carl Bean's life, his legacy, all of the amazing work that he did from his AIDS activism with Minority AIDS Project, which was serving Black and Brown communities when when there was no support, when people were looking for information, when families were in hospital, looking for guidance, grieving parents. He really helped to sort of save lives with Minority AIDS Project, and obviously with Unity Fellowship Church. He provided a spiritual home for those people who, for the lesbian and gay community who had been taught that they were unworthy of God's love. I mean, and then you add to it his artistry with his music throughout his career. But obviously, one of the highlights of the film was his 1977 recording of "I Was Born This Way," and I got to say that we when we started making this film, I don't think we knew how relevant it would become today. I mean, look at what's going on with the erasure of Black and Brown people, women, LGBTQ community. We felt that we have to document Carl's story. He's an American hero. He's part of our history. Without it, think what would be different. So anyway, so that's part of why we felt it was important to tell this story.
Sam, I wanted to welcome you back to Bitch Talk. I was like, I know this name. We've had you on in 2018. We were talking about the Sammy Davis Jr. doc that you did.
Right.
And that was at the Castro Theater. So thanks for coming back. That was a long time ago. It feels like on a different galaxy, far, far away. Um, but I really love this documentary. I loved Carl's story, didn't know about it, and so happy that you're bringing it to the forefront. I want to know, it sounds like you got to watch the full interview before diving into the documentary, but can you both talk about, did you know about Carl before you even saw the interview, Sam? And what did you know about him? And what was surprising for you both to find out about Carl's life?
Yeah, what was surprising to me was that, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s listening to a lot of Motown, but somehow, I guess I was 27 when I was born this way it came out. Maybe I wasn't listening to Motown as much, but I had never heard of Carl B. This was a surprise to me. And so when Daniel sent me the footage and I looked at it, I said, "Oh, how did I miss this guy?" And I probably know why, and I know why because by the time I was 27, I was heavily into jazz and not so much Motown. But it was like a revelation. I said, "Oh, wow." And I might have heard that music when I went to some discos, because I did go to discos in that period, but I didn't remember. So this is the thing that's wonderful about making documentaries. You uncover new people, new situations, and it becomes revelations. You say, "Oh, wow." And then to see this man who basically decided he didn't want to continue singing, he didn't want to sort of, take over David Ruffin's songs. He wanted to sort of create his own voice and then to become a minister. I thought this was amazing to me. It was just amazing. And Daniel was very tenacious in making sure he wanted to get people involved who were very close to Carl or knew about the song. I mean, so Dionne Warwick and Maxine Waters, and then getting Billy Porter on board as an EP and Questlove, and Lady Gaga. I mean, this is, what a better way to tell a story to have these wonderful people who really embrace what Carl was all about.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, I'm embarrassed to say I didn't really know much about Carl Bean, and I came to New York at the height of the AIDS crisis in the late 80s. I was involved in ACT UP, making short films and street art, and considered myself, like a kind of gay dude about town. But I still didn't, I didn't know about all the things that he had done, and I've thought about it because when I was in high school when the first reports of GRID, gay-related immune deficiency syndrome, when that was first reported. And I think about, how, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get this horrible disease because I'm gay. Just because, I mean, you guys are too young to remember, but that's the way it was reported, basically. And so I think about how things might have been different, if I had known about somebody like him as I moved into college, and then obviously, finally, into my young adult life here in New York City. And what's amazing is that many of my friends from that period, late 80s, early 90s, also came to the premiere, and they didn't know about Carl. And I think it's interesting, and even in the film, Billy says he didn't know much about Carl, and Lady Gaga confesses that she was introduced to him later in life, as well. So I think he touched so many different aspects of our culture. And obviously, lots of people did know about him, and they might have known one aspect of him. But I hope one of the things that this film does is to help connect some of those dots about all the amazing things he did, and also kind of remind us about how life might have been different if he had not been here, to do those things. So all that to say is that I'm just really grateful to have been a part of this project and to have learned, so much, and hopefully be, part of helping other people learn about what Carl brought to us.
Yeah, I think something that really struck me about his story was I grew up Catholic. I call myself a recovering Catholic because, I knew I was queer to some degree. And for me, it was like, oh, if you're gay, you're not accepted. And that was it. But I love how Carl's story, he continuously gets uplifted by the church and he turns it into, in a perfect world, what you think church should be is just a place of acceptance and love. And I feel like, if I were near that church, maybe I would want to go and experience it because I love the ritual, I love the community, but I just it was helpful for me to see church in a different light.
Oh, I think that's one of the things that's really that you come away with that it was about spirituality and the fact that they had open arms to bring anyone who wanted to come in. Anybody could come to the church. And that's what spirituality and church should be about. It shouldn't be these sort of narrow definitions about who can be in the church and who shouldn't be in the church, you know. So I think that's what's one of the amazing things about this film. And the other thing that's sort of fascinating, when I watched it with the audience on Friday before last, you could tell that the audience really embraced everything Carl was about. And Wellington said something that's really important to sort of reemphasize the fact that we're living in such divided times, and there's such a sense of negativity, particularly in the United States with this administration that's in power. To hear a man and see a man like Carl Bean who just was just such an optimist about life and had such a strong spiritual attitude. I mean, that just makes you feel good. When you walk out of the theater, when I walked out of the theater, both when we screened on Wednesday or Thursday, right? And then Friday, yeah, it was like you just felt uplifted. And to come away from a documentary feeling like that is a wonderful thing in this climate today.
Mhm.
Can I just piggyback onto the whole, I'm not a recovering Catholic, but I grew up also going to church. I was a Cub Scout in the church. I went to summer camp, church. And then, when I became a teenager, you know, I wasn't able to, while I got so much out of that experience and knowing the role that the church has played in terms of social justice, the civil rights movement. I still believe in all of the good things that can come out of the sort of spiritual movement. But I, at a certain point, felt the conflict was too great for me, and I felt that I had to choose on a certain level. Meaning, like, okay, I'm gay, right? But how does that fit into like a spiritual life? And again, one of the things I wonder about is if I had known even just a little bit about what Carl was doing, would I have felt the urgency in some ways, to make a break, from it, and would I have been able to maintain some sense of a spiritual life, knowing that, those things can coexist.
I do want to talk about one of the pearls I thought in this film. And if you can, either one of you or both of you talk about maybe finding Bunny James and who she was to Carl and to his life. I mean, man, she was also a spirit, I guess, and wrote these songs for the culture.
Well,
But yeah,
that's one of the things that's always revelatory about the documentary form. I mean, I always say that we documentary filmmakers are like archaeologists. We go and we dig and we dig and we dig, and all of a sudden, we find something that's like phenomenal. You say, "Oh, wow." And so, here's Daniel's, he had a different direction that this film was going to take. It wasn't going to be about Carl Bean, it was going to be about Lady Gaga,
Mm.
and he was doing the research, and all of a sudden he found out there was a gentleman named Carl Bean who had done an earlier version of I Was Born This Way, a different version of I Was Born This Way. And then that started the digging process. And then he finds Bunny, he finds her son, you know, and he learns that her son has what? He has the 24-inch recordings, and then he gets Billy Porter to go over there and go through rummage through, and they find the tapes. And all of a sudden, as Billy's looking through the back of the recording, fold, and he sees, what's this other song, Liberation. And so now we have not only I Was Born This Way, but we have Liberation. And here's a lady who was a hairdresser in Harlem who had this attitude about, embracing all people, particularly gay people. And so now another thing has been uncovered, in layering this story. And this is the thing that's fabulous about making documentaries. I always say, new reveals, new revelations. And you know, for me, the sequence at the end when they're in the studio and with the choir and Billy and Carl in the animation, that's like, wow. That's the summation of everything that this film is tracked to, uplift, positive energy.
Yes, we have to thank you so much for this film. We feel a real sense of urgency for stories like this, and in this day and age. So thank you so much for sharing the story of Archbishop Carl Bean, for being part of Frameline, which is, we're from San Francisco. This is one of our favorite festivals, period, to cover. It was such an honor speaking with you. We have director Sam Fuller and producer Wellington Love from the documentary I Was Born This Way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on today's show. You can find more information about this episode in our show notes.
If you're missing us, you can visit us at bitchtalkpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter and buy us a cup of coffee.
Did you know we're also on the radio? You can find us at bff.fm.
And lastly, rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. All the cool bitches are doing it.